Hello, all you T-virus infected cosmonauts. As always, I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be reviewing Resident Evil 7. Now, many of you may or may not know that I am a massive Resident Evil fan. However, in recent years, I have been let down severely by the focus on third-person shooting rather than actual survival horror as it used to be. I certainly have yearned for quite some time for the days of Resident Evil 2, Nemesis, and of course Code Veronica, which was probably my favourite Resident Evil of all time. Resident Evil 4, which was a dramatic change, was an excellent game mechanically, ran beautifully, and I have to say overall I certainly enjoyed it, apart from those boulder running scenes which were just ridiculous, but overall it was a pleasant, enjoyable game. However, I always felt that after that point they really tried to break away from the core Resident Evil experience, which was about survival horror. It was about having that fine line between I'm going to die horrendously in any given moment and I have just enough tools to fight back and keep myself alive. And I always felt that after 4 that was never ever an issue, and it was more about running and gunning and just shooting various zombies and all that kind of thing, and it never became an interesting experience, and it was no longer a core Resident Evil experience. Resident Evil 7, however, is similar to Resident Evil 4 in the fact that it is once again gone for a major change overall in its overall game mechanics, in the sense that it is now a first-person shooter in essence. And I say in essence because it is a first-person shooter survival horror. That's right, I have a massive pleasurable joy all round for everybody in the fact that Resident Evil 7 goes back to its core Resident Evil experience of survival horror. This isn't about having 1,000 bullets and going around murdering zombies and all kinds of weird looking things. This is about survival once more. The game places you in the role of Ethan, whose fiancée went missing 3 years ago, and you mysteriously get a message that she's being held in the swamps of Louisiana by the Duck Dynasty crew. So you head off willy-nilly with a knife, as you do, instead of, calling the FBI or somebody. You just go by yourself and head into the swamps and find out that the Baker family lives there, and they are horrible, terrible people who have horrible genetic mutations that allow them to survive pretty much anything. I'm not saying the story isn't good, because the Baker's family themselves have some pretty fairly interesting characters, and the game overall has some very interesting backstory. However, it certainly starts off as a bit of a cliche moment, a bit white bread and a fairly bit boring in places, but overall the thing that I took away from the story was not only the fact that it has a lot of lore to it, but the fact that it centers around this family of evil, rather than, just generic zombies or like a certain particular enemy chasing you through generic zombies. It focuses around this family, and that in itself was quite a nice touch. The thing that blew me away about Resident Evil 7 was not the graphics per se, because while the graphics are certainly fantastic and they look great, I did have some problems graphically with a couple of animation glitches here and there. I also had some frame rate drops and some weird little bits and pieces on the PC every now and again. However, what really did astound me was the fact that they didn't try to blow you away with over-the-top visuals. What they did is instead create this really fantastic, oozing dark atmosphere out of the set pieces. So every time you go through a hallway, it is just littered with detail. It is dark. There are things on the wall that you can see. There are bodies laying on the floor. There are sculpted bodies. There's all kinds of wonderful things to see in the environments. And this, primarily coupled with the music of the game, is what creates one of the best Resident Evil atmospheres we have had in a very long time. And thanks to the first person mode, you also get completely immersed in this environment. And the first person not only helps with the immersion of the atmosphere, but it also helps with the survival horror, because you can't see in a third person view. You can't see at a fixed camera point, so you can't see the entire corridor. You can see what's directly in front of you, which means that if you take a corner wrong, you could turn around and find that there is an enemy hiding right behind that tight corner, and it absolutely makes you jump out of your skin. And I absolutely love that about it. It's finally time that horror returns to the Resident Evil series, and it certainly has done so in Resident Evil 7. I certainly have a couple of bugbears with Resident Evil 7. The major one is the gunplay. I did not enjoy the gunplay, and I thought that it was executed pretty well for the most part, but certainly lacking in some departments. For example, the pistol didn't feel as powerful as it certainly should have. I think in hindsight it was probably a little bit of a mix of visual feedback in terms of recoil and of course the audio feedback, and I certainly thought that for the most part this trend continued throughout the game with a multitude of weapons, including the grenade launcher, including the flamethrower. I always thought that the feedback of the weapons and the actual impact that you made with them did not feel quite right throughout, which did break my immersion of the game a little bit for periods of time. One thing, however, that I did really enjoy, that I've traditionally hated in Resident Evil games, were the puzzles. Thanks to the first person's perspective, you can now pick up objects and turn them around, rotate them to find what you need out of that specific puzzle. And the great thing about the puzzles in this game is that you didn't really get that many hints. The hints of the puzzles and how to solve any given issue was in the environment itself, and you had to pick up on those clues in able to basically solve any given puzzle. What I absolutely loved about that was the fact that the game never handholds you through puzzles. It never says go here, go here, go here, done. It just lets you figure it out on yourself. And there was at certain points where I certainly legitimately got stuck for 15-20 minutes or more, and eventually finding out the puzzle and, you know, really unlocking the next area certainly gave me an immense feeling of satisfaction, more so than probably any other Resident Evil game before. That being said, while I did certainly enjoy the puzzles, I have to say that one of the biggest bugbears of the game, also barring the gunplay, was the fact of how the game tells its lore and backstory. Now, it tells this in videotapes and various items that you can pick up through Resident Evil, and then what that does, that transports you back in time and you play through the memory as the survivor themselves, which on one hand is a hell of a lot of fun. On second hand, because it reuses the exact same sets and doesn't really change the environment to reflect the time period, it leaves you just replaying sections of the game over and over, which for me artificially extended the game's length at no real tangible benefit. And this is coming from someone who absolutely loves to lore dive and lore explore, and, you know, will literally complete a game to 100% to make sure that I've got every single piece of lore. And in Resident Evil, it just feels very chorish, because it just feels that it extends these areas out unnecessarily. Now, this coupled with the fact that the main story itself is far shorter than I thought it was actually going to be, that in itself was a little disappointing. That being said, though, I have to say that overall Resident Evil 7 is bloody fantastic. It comes back to that core Resident Evil experience of I'm crapping my pants, and it is probably one of the most atmospheric horror first-person shooter games to date. The visuals, the environments, the Baker family, the voice acting, everything is just absolutely sublime, and it is executed near flawlessly. And I enjoyed the game so much that I just found myself just playing it and playing it and playing it, and hours of time would go by instead of me thinking, you know, oh, how long have I played this? You know, this is getting a little bit boring. I just really immersed myself in this world. I was crapping my pants at every single stage, and I just found that the whole atmosphere of the game just worked wonders. And it is probably certainly one of my favourite Resident Evil games of all time to date. And I think that it is certainly one that, as a starting point for a new line of Resident Evil games, is a fantastic starting point. I love the atmosphere, I love the story for the most part, I love the environment, I love the mechanics for the most part, and I have to say that it is certainly worth picking up straight away. And that is my review of Resident Evil 7. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Let me know what your thoughts are on the game in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the subscribe button, the like and share on social media, and as always, I will see you next time.